Lester, Wushu engineer. I'm joined here today by the Wushu scientist.
Hi.
We have some exciting news about the master's study that the Wushu scientist completed last year. But first, I'd like to ask her to give us a brief summary of the study and the results.
Okay, yeah, so just briefly, so in the master's study, what we did is we had two groups of people. We had trained martial arts practitioners, which were Kung Fu practitioners,
Yep.
and then we had a matched group who were matched in terms of sex, age, and activity level in terms of physical activity. And with the two groups, what we did was that we had two exercises that they performed. One was pushing against a load cell closer into the body, and the other one was being pushed against the chest, also by a load cell. So measuring the amount of force that they were able to produce or resist in those two positions. And then at the same time, we measured intra-abdominal pressure, so pressure produced within the abdominal cavity and pressure produced in the esophageal area, as well as muscle activation of certain key muscle groups like the lower abdominal muscles and the diaphragm as well. So what we found, there were quite a number of significant results that we found in the study. The main ones were that the martial arts practitioners produced more force and resisted more force, significantly more force. And I think it was around about 30%, in some cases, more force than the untrained group.
Okay.
And then also we found that the martial arts practitioners were using more intra-abdominal pressure in relation to pressure in the chest area. So they had a lot more pressure here, and they also activated the diaphragm and the lower abdominal muscles more in some cases, depending on the exercise. So quite significant results there with those, and it's stuff that hasn't actually been measured before.
Right. Okay. So really interesting. So those two exercises that were used, the being pushed exercise and the pushing exercise, were there some restrictions placed on people when they were doing that?
Yeah. So one of the things is that, especially with the pushing exercise, one of the potential issues was that someone could just lean into it. So basically just using their body weight. So we had a camera mounted on the side next to their head, and we had them positioned right close up to the load cell so that we could first of all monitor the position of the head, so we could see if they were leaning, that we would stop it and make sure that they were straight. And also the position of their body meant that it was very difficult to actually get their body weight behind that. And then with the being pushed as well, we also had the camera set up so that they couldn't lean into it. And it was just, they had to stand with their feet, and if they had to step back, then they were destabilized, and then it stopped.
So that I imagine that well, primarily the reason that these restrictions were placed was tied in with the ability to generate force while in an upright position, instead of falling into an opponent, or compensating for incoming force by leaning into it, which is an inherently unstable way of dealing with incoming and outgoing forces.
Yeah, which is obviously very important in martial arts.
Very important in martial arts in terms of either application of force in standing grappling, or primarily in striking, because of course if I have to lean into something in order to generate that kind of force, then I'm inherently going to be unstable. And of course, if I'm receiving on the receiving end of that force, and I'm being knocked backwards all the time, and my structure is being compromised, then I'm also going to be quite unstable. So those two very important characteristics for martial artists when they are moving in a standing position, upright on their feet. Okay, well that's really interesting. So to summarize that, would I be able to say that the study takes a different approach to investigating what are known as the internal aspects of martial arts, traditional martial arts. Is one of your goals establishing a potential physiological basis for some of these internal concepts, such as chi?
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, as we've discussed on this channel before, the concept of chi is, you know, very varied, and there's lots of kind of confusing and conflicting definitions, and what we're really wanting to do is look at, well, what is actually physiologically happening inside a martial arts practitioner when they do things like generating force. And we believe that one of the things very strongly associated with that is internal pressures, and that's really what we're wanting to look into.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's really interesting. So in a nutshell, that's the your master's study. So perhaps you could fill us in on what the good news is.
Yeah. So just, I think, a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, it was finally published in the European Journal of Applied Physiology.
Wow.
And yeah, so it's fully published. We'll put a link to the article in the description, so you can go there and read it.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Now, to my knowledge, the European Journal of Applied Physiology is what is known as a Q1 journal. What does that mean?
Okay, so the Q is like the quartile of journals. So Q1 is within the top 25% of journals on a particular topic or area. So the European Journal of Applied Physiology is Q1 journal in orthopedics and sports medicine, as well as occupational and industrial health. So those two associated areas that are associated with our research. So yeah, it's in the top 25% of journals.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
So is it common for a master's study to be published?
It's not very common at all, and like even some PhD students struggle to even get their research published as well, even especially in kind of top journals. So yeah, it's not very common.
Okay.
Yeah.
So for a master's study to be published at all, and be published in no less than a Q1 journal, is actually very rare indeed. So very well done.
Yeah, well, thanks for all of your help as well.
Which elements do you think, which elements of your master's study paper do you think were the strongest elements that are recommended for publication in a Q1 journal?
Okay, so, well, when a paper is considered for publication in a journal, obviously it goes through a peer review process, which is really, really important. In science, it gets peer reviewed by a number of experts in the field. And the things that they look for are, first of all, the scientific kind of rigor of the study. So things like your statistical analysis, is it good enough? Is it showing what you say it's showing, and all of that? And then also the other thing is the novelness of the study. And I think that I really appreciate the work that my supervisors did with me on that, to help me to make sure that in terms of the data and the statistics, that it was sound, and that, and then the area that we're researching is completely novel as well. But I think it's those aspects, definitely.
Okay, so very novel, very rigorous, and the results were very compelling. And okay, so those are the things that recommended it. Could you summarize and explain the main underlying intent of your master's study? So what are you hoping to establish there?
Yeah, well, I think we kind of touched on that before. Like really what we're wanting to accomplish, or we're wanting to accomplish with the master's study, is to show kind of our hypothesis was, as we said, that chi is associated with internal pressures. So we wanted to directly measure that and look at a group of martial artists and and ask the question, well, is their internal pressure different to comparable untrained people? So
by untrained, you don't necessarily mean people who are not physically active.
yeah.
Of course.
So so they're comparable in that they were also in the other sports and exercise disciplines of a
just
sort
not in martial arts.
Yeah,
Just
so-
not in the martial arts in which we are practicing this
yeah.
particular
Well,
type
actually,
of control.
one of the conditions for the control group was that they had no martial arts experience. So yeah, but they were physically
But we're
active
physically active
at the same level.
at the same level as the test group.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. So as we shared in a previous video, we've already begun on your PhD study,
Yeah.
which is following on to your master's study. Could you please give us a brief overview of your PhD study?
Yeah, so basically the rationale behind the PhD study is like we've found this, that trained martial arts practitioners have this association with using intra-abdominal pressure to produce and resist forces. So what we wanted to look at in the PhD study is, well, can we take a group of untrained people and can we train them in a reasonable space of time, a useful period of time, to be able to do the same thing? So to be able to use intra-abdominal pressure and increase the amount of force that they can generate or resist. And when my thesis was being reviewed, one of the experts in the field who was looking at my thesis brought up the area of heavy load carriage in the military, and how this is a major issue with people in the military have to carry heavy loads, and they've done a little bit of work, or some researchers have done a little bit of work into respiratory muscle training, so training the diaphragm and the respiratory muscles, and it's shown preliminary results that can help to improve someone's ability to carry a heavy load. And so this person suggested that the application of the master's research would be really relevant to go into looking to see how that can help with heavy load carriage as well. So what we're going to be looking at is, can this training help to improve someone's ability to carry heavy loads? And one of the key things as well is the prevention of lower back injury. So one of the things that happens when someone's carrying like a heavy backpack is compression of the spine and potential lower back injuries. So from other preliminary research that's been done, there's a connection between intra-abdominal pressure and extension or prevention of compression of the spine. So if we can train people to use intra-abdominal pressure to help to support carrying of heavy loads, then that could potentially help to prevent and reduce lower back injury in those cases. So that's really where we're heading with the PhD.
So that sounds like a really beneficial, like if the PhD study is successful and the training program that is developed is successful, that sounds like a very beneficial outcome for a whole range of different professions and even the common person in the street.
Yeah.
So I actually have one of my students is actually in the military here in Australia, and is actually, or has been actually working his way up to get into the special forces here in Australia. And one of the things that he has been discussing with me, and which he is particularly concerned about, is not necessarily his ability to get into the special forces, but the cost of actually the long-term health cost of becoming a special forces soldier or operative, is that many of them leave service with lifelong spinal injuries as a result of a heavy load carriage. He was mentioning that one of the things that paratroopers have to deal with is carrying anywhere up to 70 kilograms on their back,
yeah,
and parachuting in. And of course, like that kind of impact on joints like knees and lower back and really the whole human frame has a really terrible cost, long term. So it would be great if something could be developed from this line of PhD study, to actually offset that, compensate for it,
yeah,
to reduce those kinds of joint and spinal injuries.
yeah.
So that's really interesting.
Yeah, hopefully, and as you saw in the last video, that there's a potential there, that we know that using Qigong and what we do in the training to actually expand and extend the joints.
So lengthen and extend, almost like you're engaging a hydraulic suspension system through your body, like you're manipulating the forces and the pressures in your body to create this internal hydrostatic or hydraulic suspension system.
Yeah.
Do you think that there'll be more to investigate in this line of research once you've completed your PhD?
Yeah, I think we will hopefully, we'll be spending our whole lives researching into this. Like, there's so much depth and wealth of knowledge in traditional martial arts that just hasn't been touched yet by science. And really, like, what we're looking at, the idea that there could be kind of almost like, as you say, like a secondary hydrostatic system that helps to augment what we traditionally see in science as like just the bones and the muscles of the body and how that acts. That's a completely new idea and field that just that alone we can spend the rest of our lives on that, but there's just so much more. So yeah, there's a lot to do, a lot to research.
So that kind of almost answers my next question, which is there potential for this line of research to become a new and unique and well delineated branch of research within the broader field of sports science?
Yeah, I think so. I think there is potential. Like, once it starts to be opened up, I think hopefully there'll be more researchers that will come on board and look into it and what's going on, and yeah, it could change a lot of things.
Very, very exciting.
Yeah.
So we have really touched and almost answered this question as well earlier on in the conversation, but what are the kind of benefits that you hope to bring to professionals, sports people, and to the average person in the street by opening this new branch of research? In other words, what good could come of investigating all of this?
Well, I think that, like, really what this may do is kind of open up a potential for people to understand more about, like, how the body works. And so in sports and just in everyday activities, as I said before, that it's more than just the muscles and the bones working together. Like, there's more to the body that we can use to help to prevent injury, to help to improve our performance in sports or activities. So yeah, I think could be really good.
Do you think there's the potential for these benefits to filter down to the average person in the street?
I think, yeah, given enough time and understanding, I think that if this study could add more relevance to traditional martial arts training, and that could be made accessible to more people, that can really help to benefit them in those ways as well. Yeah.
Well, that all sounds really quite exciting, and I'm also thoroughly enjoying the small part that I have to play in your continuing research. I really enjoy developing the specialized test equipment and the methods, and of course I'm going to be responsible for the training programs for the various test and control groups. So I am let's say, cautiously optimistic that I can develop the necessary training programs. It's a challenge, but I am looking forward to it.
Yeah, well, it certainly wouldn't be happening without all of that as well. So yeah.
Yeah, but thank you for coming into the channel to explain the good, to share the good news, and also explain where we're going from there. And I hope you, the viewer, enjoyed this brief video announcement of the exciting news. And I'll see you all again next time. Cheers.